so the only other business,
She's gonna do the warrants.
is what Kim asked for, so.
Can you speak up?
But it's public, everybody has to be able to hear.
No, well, but they move up. This is a private meeting.
So to agree on the process, there was confusion or some unknowns of the last, where, you know what the budget committee did to speak. And so, unfortunately, one person presents the meeting. We don't get to see the presentation. We don't get to approve the presentation. We don't have to read.
I think they have. We being an individual you're referring to, right?
Members of the budget.
Well, when you're referring to.
But you approved the budget to go forward to the public hearing. So that's your blessing. Right.
So can I, maybe I can clarify some of this because I went on and did some research as far as what should happen and not happen. And my understanding is just like Charlie said last year, the budget committee can speak to the residents that we choose to do, not on this table. So part of the idea for me is just to let people understand, this is the budget committee, they're not going to be asking questions. However, if they wanted to speak to the residents, they can do the last to go to the mic and say,
And that was allowed at the public hearing.
and that is.
You went up and talked to the public resident. I wasn't happy about it, the way you handled it. But I said, if you want to talk, you have to talk to them like as a resident.
I don't understand.
I think that was the source of the confusion. I think the first request or something was to speak as a budget committee member.
Right.
And that's when some of us said, well, you can't speak as a budget committee member because we don't know what you're going to say. And so that's when it was then.
Well, we don't know what you're going to say either. We've not seen the presentation.
We've already seen it.
No, we haven't seen the presentation.
I can't imagine that they're going to see anything that we haven't already seen regarding the budget.
But we have approved the budget, have we not?
Yes.
So the bottom line figure that's being presented, we approved, correct?
A majority of the budget committee did not approve it. Well, so here's my problem, is the committee is split on the approved budget. So we're going to hear the select board or the budget committee ex officio's position on that. But that does not give the people who didn't approve it the opportunity to present their position.
But this group, even if it was, 6-5 or whatever, the majority approved that budget, correct? Okay. So as a committee, we approved it. There's always going to be, do we need to get to the point where we have a dissenting opinion? Listed, I don't know. Or is it sufficient to simply, at these meetings, as we said, whoever wants to speak steps down and addresses the group?
But that being said, I will ask that everybody who's on the committee sit at the table, because I found that offensive last week, that we had a table set up for the budget committee and only half of the members were sitting there. And I don't think that's necessary. I think you can sit here as a budget committee.
Well, it was off to the side and I was enjoying.
But it's a
Don't do that. Can I finish my conversation?
Sure.
But I think it's appropriate that the public's here to know who their budget committee is. And if I was not a resident that had been there a long time, I wouldn't have been able to figure that out. And I just think, we're here as a committee. I believe absolutely you should be able to speak as a resident, but you can't do it from this table.
So, just for clarity, if I decide to get up and speak as a resident, they'll know on the budget committee as well. So
I'm sorry.
they'll know on the budget committee as well.
Oh, sure, but you're
Not speaking for 12
declaring,
people.
right, and like I did last week, I said I'm up here speaking as a citizen, not as the budget committee itself. Are we good with that? I did some research, that's how it's done, and I thought last week went really well with Charlie. Everybody was able to speak and do their thing. And
Yeah, no, I'm fine with it. It's just
And it's been,
And there's a difference.
there is a difference,
There
yeah.
is a difference.
And again, arguing with me.
Right, well, we
So,
don't want to, I don't want
yeah.
back and forth, but what I was reading is essentially, the budget committee's not even to ask questions at all, because we've already done the approval, and you can actually make it so the public's not asking questions, which I would find dumb. You know, I mean, we're here for public comment. I think in order to get comment, they have to ask questions. But it was very clear that the committee itself, if they want individually to speak, they have to be out there as the public.
But it's like to ask questions. isn't it?
Sure, yeah, yeah, because I mean, obviously, I wouldn't want a meeting where people can't ask questions, I mean, there's gonna be questions. That's one, okay, is everybody good? And as far as the whole process of who's presenting and when, I think that's something that should be with the guide law, or the guide laws, guide bylaw, whatever the guidelines that we have set up for the next committee to look at. You know, that should be something that's done at the beginning of the session, not, you know, 2 weeks before, 2 weeks before.
And by law, the budget committee is supposed to be, but you are budget.
Right, she is. They
But we
are.
don't see that presentation in advance of the meeting, and that's my problem.
So I think in March or whenever we do our next year, here we are, let's get all our guidelines together. That would be something that, you know, you should bring up and we can discuss it better. That's all. Everybody good? Oh, no, Charlie?
I chose not to sit there because it was a public meeting, not a budget meeting. That's why I didn't sit there.
It's a deliberative session.
It was a little-
My-
That was the reason.
Okay, let me just, because maybe I am unclear. I thought that it was the budget, part of some of the budget committee who determined we had to have a table over there at one point, because we've never done it in all the years that I've been on this committee, except maybe what, the past 3?
So about 2 or 3 years ago, the Municipal Association published an article in their monthly magazine about how to conduct good public hearings and good town meetings, deliberative sessions, and the like. And their recommendation was always to have the governing body, if it's a deliberative session or a town meeting, the governing body front and center, and the budget committee, if you have an official budget committee, which apparently we do, off to the side or up front, offset, because they are also responsible for a part of the presentation that the legislative body is going to be talking about. And so it's a way to show who your public officials are. Your governing body, whether it's the school board or the select board, and then the budget committee, who's been, who has approved or presented or whatever, the budgets
Okay.
for both entities.
Just a follow-up, Suzanne, another best practice that I was reading about on the Municipal Association that I think we consider is having, for town meeting, having a section for non-residents. A seating section for non-residents.
And I just have a,
Can Vern go
Yeah,
first
sure.
and then you, and you can poke me because.
No, that's right, that's all right.
I can't see you.
Well, the fact that the municipal association may suggest a protocol doesn't mean we have to do it. They're just suggesting a protocol.
Which
So,
protocol are you referring
The
to?
part about having seats over here for the budget committee, I mean, it's not unreasonable to say, all the budget committee members just sort of sit in the front row. We can do that. We don't have to do that. And if we want to sit in the audience, we can.
And again, that could be something next year, we should, at the beginning of the session, iron all this out as to how we want to move forward. I'm not going to remember it all, so I'm going to read it up to you guys too.
yeah, just 2 comments about the seating separately. We have done that occasionally on the school deliberative session, but then it was determined that the easiest thing to do was that every resident would have a card, so there'd be no problem with voting or whatnot. So that was how that was handled. That was determined by the moderator and other folks who were in charge at that time. It was about 3 years ago when we started using the cards. Just because someone who oversees the whole state and sees ideas that might work well everywhere, maybe they don't work well here. Maybe our elected officials don't want to be recognized. I don't know. I guess we'll figure that out in April.
Just some point of information. At a public hearing, I don't believe you need to be a registered voter of whatever it is to be a part of the public and to make a comment. You do at a town meeting or a deliberative session. At a public hearing, I'm not sure if that's true. I mean, it's a point of information.
Vern and Denise?
Well, you definitely do have to be a registered voter. You can get permission from the governing body or the budget committee to permit non-citizens to speak, but no, they cannot speak.
That's a,
Sorry,
well, I know that's definitely true for deliberative in town meeting, where votes are taken. I know that is definitely true. I do not know about public hearings. I do not know.
Okay, so I have 2 points. I think Vernon's right that you do have to be a resident, and the reason why is because we've always asked permission to allow the SAU staff to speak on behalf of the school board when they needed their assistance, and we had to ask permission of the governing body to allow that.
Yes, and that's a deliberative session, not a public.
It wouldn't be any of the meetings. If they spoke, they should have been recognized and asked if they could speak as residents. But, you know, it's always been the practice to do that. The other thing is about the sitting. We're elected officials and we represent this town, and we should stand up and be proud to sit at the table and say, this is who we are. And if you're not proud of doing that, you should be an elected official. That's my opinion. We should be a unity, we should be together, and be representing as a whole. And that's my opinion.
I think,
we just had a point about this meeting last year, where, how was it that anonymous was able to get and speak?
That was at a hearing.
About the fire.
That was at a hearing, and I declared him out of order.
Right.
But, so we don't have any indication whether people are residents or not.
He's
And
an
he didn't
employee,
state his
though.
information.
I'm not sure. Well, I agree. I don't think he should have spoke as well. But I don't know if it's because they thought he was an employee and that was allowed. I'm not sure. I wouldn't have to be, I'm sure, because he got talked to.
and then that's the whole point of saying, what can you know, what your address is to ferret that out, because that shouldn't.
No, it shouldn't.
And I guess, you know, maybe at the beginning of the meetings, we could say, you know, anybody, you know, the only people that can speak are residents. And if you're not a resident, you're getting dispensation to speak if you're allowed. The other question I have in terms of the voting, do we really think there's an issue with people from out of town voting in our elections? Because I don't think there is. I mean, in terms of having seated in a separate area.
Since the cards.
Yeah, I mean, I just,
Well, I think that people were uneasy when, you know, you're doing a voice vote and you have, you know, mostly the school, let's be honest, most of the school, when you have your staff members here, you know, they're thinking they're voting, and I don't think they were. I just think that there was a crowd of them that were not residents, but they were staff members listening, and I think that was one of the reasons why they decided to go with the card, which it just made it easier.
Right. Yeah. Does anybody else have anything? Okay, 8:30, we are
Get the front row back.
I just want to be in the front row. You guys start to screw me up here. Only the front row for the town meeting. Each body has its own procedure. But, and my example is Dover City Council, where I represent rezoning their properties or I was not allowed to speak initially because I'm not a resident of Dover, even though I'm an attorney for property owners. One of the members of that, another member said, I want to.
So that's good to know, because then at our
Right.
we could just say, I would do that for the child, and I would do it for the residents of town, and of course, to start the meeting, if you would please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I'm Michelle Small, and I would like to open the public hearing for the town of Rollinsford at 9 a.m. on February 10, 2018. The purpose to take public comment on a proposed town water and sewer budgets. I'll introduce the board, just in case you don't know, although I see a lot of familiar faces here, who our board is. I'll read from my list rather than trying to see. I'm Michelle Small, I'm the chair. Denise Knowles is vice chair. Bill Irving, Vern Crozier, Andy Biel, Nancy Dion, Charlie Dion, Ed Jansen, Kim St. Hilaire, ex officio Suzanne Heward for the town select board, Dennis St. Hilaire, ex officio for the water and sewer, and Judy Nelson, ex officio for the school board. Before we start, I just want to set some ground rules. It is a public hearing, which is the opportunity for you to provide comment to the budget committee. I would like you to ask your questions through myself rather than getting into any banter with the committee. Our committee won't be asking questions. If they want to speak as an individual, they will go up to the mic in the middle, just as any of you would. When you do go to the mic, please state your name and address, and please don't crowd somebody who's speaking. If you would just stand back a bit so that they have plenty of room. Keep the comments relevant to what the budget is, which I hope everybody picked up the flyers up front. I got ahead of myself here. The most important thing is what I would hope everybody will remember. I've been on this committee for, I think, 15 years, and we are all neighbors. We all live next to each other and meet each other in local places. We're a community. And I'd like people to remember that a democracy is a difference of opinion. That's what makes it interesting. But you're still neighbors. And at the end of the day, I would hope that everybody leaves with the feeling of respect, that they were allowed to say what they felt, and that they were heard. So with that, I'd like to open with the town budget, which Suzanne Heward will present. And she'll give a brief overview, and then we can take any comment.
Thank you, Michelle. Good morning, everybody. A couple of housekeeping issues. One, there is a lot of material out back. There's more material on the website. The board's starting to release some things. We sent out a little blurb yesterday with a link. So with that link, you'll be able to go to some folders, and we will be adding materials from now through town meeting to those folders. So go back and take a look at them over the next couple of weeks. Also, what we're discussing this morning will be budget-related items, the operating budget and all of the warrants that have appropriations. But there are two warrants that, while they don't have appropriations, we are required by state law to hold public hearings on them. So I'm going to announce to you when those are. So on Monday, this coming Monday at 6 o'clock, we will be holding a public hearing at Town Hall on the article with regard to authorizing Keno in the municipality of Rollinsford, Monday at 6 o'clock. And then on Tuesday the 20th, so the following week, we will be hosting a public hearing at Town Hall at 6 o'clock on a petition warrant article to question whether we want to become an SB2 municipality. Okay? Thank you. Now let's go on to the operating budget. So we're going to be looking at the entire budget. So that's the operating budget, excuse me, which is recommended by the budget committee, and then all of the warrants that have appropriations. And while the budget committee cannot change those warrants, they can review and choose to recommend or not recommend. And those recommendations show up on the town warrant. I need my tool. Excuse me. So here's an overall summary. With we have increased revenues, anticipated revenues. We have a growing assessed valuation, even beyond the fact that we've been valued. And together, all of that plus the expenditures and the appropriations that are being proposed today, with all of that, we are estimating really holding steady on the municipal part of our tax effort and tax rate. So we're actually looking right now at a small decrease of about $5,000 in the overall tax effort, which is about a negative 2 cents in the tax rate. So let's say holding steady. Here are the highlights of the proposed budget committee operating budget. There are some budget structural changes that are put in by the board, the select board, who manage the budget and final analysis. And so they are, we've collected for privacy reasons that health insurance premiums and other, like life and disability premiums, into personnel administration. So, but you can see the comparison if you look at that, because we've collected all the expenditures for last year as well. And you will find with health premiums that there was a 6.1% decrease, surprisingly, in our health premiums. The line has been increased by a few $100s because we have an additional staff member who is now on it. But we were very pleased to see that 6.1% decrease. We also consolidated, or we have lines now for full-time staff and part-time staff. That's most notable in the police department and the highway department. Those salaries had already been consolidated for a number of years in the transfer station section and the fire department section. But in order to provide the town with information on what our staff, our employees earn, we have a new report. Is it out there? It's out there. It's called Salaries and Wages or Earnings Report or something like that. So by position, so 20 firefighters, 30 firefighters, you can see what they have earned throughout the course of 2017. Police chief, fire chief, no, he's an elected official, he's just a employee. So police chief, lieutenant, sergeant, and the like. This year, there's one area of disagreement between the board and the budget committee. The budget committee elected to reduce the operating budget by $250,000 with the guidance that had come from the road maintenance line. Their objective was to, not as a budget committee because they can't, but outside of the budget committee, put together a petition warrant article to have a warrant for $250,000 for a road budget. Our town attorney, Attorney Roberts, is here today to give the Assembly and the Budget Committee some legal guidance on that issue. So that will come up immediately after my presentation. All right, some other changes. We now have debt because we were authorized by last year's town meeting to go out and borrow money for culverts, for fire engine, and for transfer station improvements. If you recall, we were projecting that debt service to start out at $110,000 per year. We are really delighted to say that our debt service starts at just under $80,000 per year. For two reasons. We have some advantageous terms, and we've got a handout out back on what those terms are and the repayment schedule. And also, we ended up not having to borrow quite so much. So we got a grant from the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services via US EPA for $110,000 with regard to the fire engine. So that was a big help. And we ended up not spending quite so much on the culvert project. Compensation increases. So we are giving at least 2% across the board to staff. Additionally, we've added 3% to the Rollinsford Police salary base, not to individuals, but to the salary base. And what will happen is that this year, the chief will make recommendations of salary increases to police staff based on merit. So we don't yet know what they will be, but he's got, a 3% increase to the salary base to work with. There's also a large increase percentage-wise. It's only a couple $1,000s, but percentage-wise to the fire department salaries line. These are our on-call folks who have been making pretty much, it's not really an hourly rate, they have a formula that they use, but it turns out to be pretty much close to, or not much more than minimum wage. And so Fire Chief Rutherford came to us and said, we're really having trouble maintaining on-call firemen, firefighters, on-call firefighters, and he recommended that we increase that line, which we did. We actually increased it by maybe $1,000 more than he was suggesting. And we are planning in this upcoming year to appoint a committee to look at on-call fire service and how we can best maintain it, particularly for day coverage. We highlighted in the select board's annual report, which you'll see in the town meeting, and our fire chief has also, I think, spoken about it in his annual report, if you'd like a little bit more information on that. In personnel administration, as I've already said, we've consolidated, you'll see there all of our health premiums and other insurance premiums. And I've already said that we've had a small decrease, so am I going backwards? No, okay. In buildings and facilities, what we hope to do with the town hall budget line is to paint and repair the portico. If you've been to town hall recently, you noticed it really needs, those columns are starting to rot, so it needs some work. We are hoping to demolish the shed, the old highway shed on Silver Street. We've actually paid for it out of 2017 funds, thanks to the police department's savings in the budget lines. But there is an expense in FY18 for, you ready for it? Asbestos abatement. So there is some asbestos in that building, and we're going to have to pay to have it abated and removed, by certified removers. So that'll cost us about $2,000. And the fire department has been, we increased their budget for maintenance a little bit last year. We're continuing with that increase this year. They have been kind of marching forward, trying to make some needed upgrades to the fire department, like new flooring, some painting, some plumbing, some heating, all of those kinds of things. Highway department. So there's a lot to say here in the highway department. There have been some large changes. As you know, our road agent of, I think, 7 years resigned as of September 1. I suppose there's no good time of year for your road agent to leave, but with the approach of winter months, we were near panic mode about not having a road agent because we have no other full-time employee in the highway department. So we formulated a search committee, hired a road agent, and both the search committee and the road agent very strongly recommended that the board consider having a full-time highway department assistant, and so we did that in the fall. And so we now have a road agent, George Gilmet, and a full-time highway department assistant, Ed Walsh. And I think we're going to see, we're going to enjoy the results of both of those hires. Now, the board doesn't take lightly adding full-time staff. Full-time staff is expensive. There's no getting around it because you have to pay retirement, you have to pay health insurance, so they are expensive. But again, it was very strongly recommended, and because we now have full-time staff, we will enjoy some savings in other lines. Will it be enough to offset the full-time hire? No, but there are other advantages to having 2 full-time employees. There's a real do-it-yourself philosophy with our new highway department. They're pragmatic, they're problem solvers. One of them has a patent for equipment that he developed somewhere else. And we are going to see some savings. There will be, of course, a reduction in our part-time and seasonal help because now both of our employees have commercial driver's licenses, so we don't need as much seasonal help with the plowing. We intend, if our warrant article for a roadside mowing attachment passes, we intend to do our own roadside mowing, our own brush chipping, our own ditching, some small road repair, and some equipment fabrication. So, and possibly some street sweeping. So we're exploring all of those things. I think we're really pleased, and we hope that you will be pleased at some of the changes and improvements that you see in the town with our newly constituted highway department. Of course, you can't talk about highway department without talking about our roads. And you may remember that we developed a 10-year road plan last year with the Stratford Regional Planning Commission. And, I'm sorry, 2 years ago. And in 2017, we're going to upgrade this every year, but in 2017, we were ready to upgrade our 10-year road plan, our road agent design. So while we didn't update it, we are continuing to work from it. We will update it in the spring with our new road agent. But in the meantime, we're gonna follow what the plan is. And so the next two items on the road plan were two developments. The Woodlands and Roberts Farm, so Moses Carr, Heritage Drive, Woods Run, River Road. We plan to have about a $300,000 contract, road contract, and we'll do all of one development and as much of the others we can fit into the $300,000 contract. And then whatever we don't finish, we will do the following year. The transfer station, you will see over 5% decrease overall in the transfer station. If you look at the municipal solid waste hauling line, there's a 25 decrease there due entirely to having now a second compactor. I don't remember what the actual budgeted amount is for that line, but we didn't have as much experience with the second compactor in 2017 as we hoped, so it's possible that we will enjoy savings even above and beyond what we're putting in the budget. We'll just have to wait and see. As I said before, we're going to be doing our own brush chipping. And another item of note, it really doesn't have a budgetary implication this year, is that the board is considering leaving the truck hauling cooperative. This is a subset of the Lamprey Regional Waste Cooperative that we belong to, so we're not thinking about leaving the waste cooperative. Just this little subset. There are 5 communities that bought a big truck, hired somebody to drive the truck, et cetera, et cetera. And we think that we can do better in the open market with, from year to year, getting contracts on hauling our municipal solid waste to the turnkey landfill site. So we're exploring removing ourselves from that cooperative. There's a 20% decrease in direct assistance or welfare. This is a little bit like special education in the school side, where we are required to take care of the poor in the town, and you don't really know what's going to happen from year to year. The one difference with the school is that one special ed case can cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. That wouldn't be the case for us in direct assistance, but could we be putting ourselves into a bind by decreasing it by 20%? Well, possibly, but we're careful. We've been watching it over the last few years. Our administrative assistant has been managing this function for us since she came on board, and we have benefited from having one consistent approach to the application of direct assistance. And since she's been on board, we've had a persistent surplus in direct assistance. So we are recommending a 20% increase. Recreation, this is a big number. There is a 70% increase. However, the revenue offsets over 97% of that budget, of the recreation budget. The rec committee, we're really delighted with the newly constituted rec committee. And last year was the first instance of Camp Raleigh. And this coming year, they're hoping to do a teen camp for teenagers. So the programs, those two programs are entirely offset by revenue, and they constitute about 97% of the recreation budget. The other items in there are winter basketball and fireworks for Family Fun Day. And the committee is hoping to do something with seniors, and so they may start out by just doing a survey of our seniors. So there's a line in there with a little bit of money for that. All right, so to sum the operating budget, which is one warrant article, we have increases to the operating budget, but there's offset by large increases in revenue. Some of those large increases are from increased detail work in the police department, and detail work brings in more than what the expense is. So actually, as the detail goes up, the revenue goes up even at a somewhat steeper incline. The rec programs, of course, are offset largely by revenue. And we got an additional almost $50,000 from the New Hampshire Department of Transportation this year to fund road maintenance I think it's from the Volkswagen settlement. And we have new operators for the hydro plant, and they are projecting, we've been using 35,000 as our revenue budget. When they did their business plan to see whether it made sense for them to take over or bid on taking over the operations of the hydro plant, and the company is Green Mountain Power, they were projecting $55,000 as revenue per year for the town. So the board chose not to raise the revenue by that much, but we did raise it by 7,000. So the bottom line, again, I'm going to repeat this bottom line. If you look at what we're planning for the operating budget, for all of our capital expenditures, for all of our reserve fund proposed deposits, holding steady on the municipal tax rate effort, with actually very slight decrease. That's the operating budget. Michelle, I don't know, do you want me to just go on with the wants?
Why don't we see if there's any comment on the operating budget and then go to the warrants?
Can we ask our town attorney to speak on that?
Sure.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. For the record,
Yep.
Steve Roberts, 130 Roberts Road, as opposed to Roberts Farm, just the original Roberts Farm, just so people understand that. I was asked to speak on the particular issue of the Budget Committee deleting $250,000 from the operating budget, and then certain members of the Budget Committee, along with others, submitting a petition warrant article that asked for $250,000 to be placed as a special warrant article. So the Board of Selectmen...
Could you speak up a little?
The microphone is not working.
Can you come to the podium? Sure.
I'm not sure it's on.
Steve, if you want to, you can use this one if you want.
That might be easier.
Yeah. Vern, can you find out why that's so low?
Try it again.
That's better. Is that better?
Yeah.
That's better, okay. I don't know if I should start over again or not.
Yes.
The Board of Selectmen asked me to take a peek at the issue of, at one of the prior meetings of the Budget Committee, $250,000 was deleted from the operating budget for road maintenance repairs. And then certain members of the Budget Committee, along with others, submitted a petition warrant article to the town for that same exact purpose. And the board asked me to take a look into that. And I'm here just to provide my insights and the results of what the research has shown. First and foremost, the New Hampshire legislature is very, very clear, along with the New Hampshire Supreme Court, about protecting the flexibility and the discretion and the power of the Board of Selectmen. So under RSA 3210, there's very clear guidance that the governing body, the Board of Selectmen in this case, can transfer appropriations, any unexpended balances remaining, to some other appropriation. That transfer cannot be challenged by either the Budget Committee nor any other citizen. There's no authority to dispute or challenge the discretion of the governing body in making those transfers. That particular right of the Board of Selectmen to make those transfers of unexpended balances has been reviewed by the New Hampshire Supreme Court at least 3 occasions. The most recent back in 2006, Sullivan versus Hampton Board of Selectmen. And I'm saying this to make a record, by the way, just so that everyone's very clear. I'm trying to lay out the position just so it's clear in the minutes and in the record as to exactly what the position is. So under the Sullivan case, 135 New Hampshire 690, the New Hampshire Supreme Court allowed, over the objections of the Budget Committee, allowed the Board of Selectmen to adjust line item budgets in a default budget, even though the Budget Committee had said, no, you can't change that. The court very clearly said, no, the Board of Selectmen has to have the requisite flexibility to do that. They were elected to do that. That's their job. In McDonald versus the Town of Derry, back in 1976, the Supreme Court rejected the attempt of voters to lock the selectmen into certain appropriated items by individual line item.
There, the voters tried to say, here's a line item, you have to spend the money for that line item only, and the court said, no, that's not what RSA 3210 means. To the extent that there's unexpended balances, the Board of Selectmen has to have the flexibility, the discretion to use that money. And then finally, Baker versus Hudson, that was a school district case, but the same thing. The Budget Committee deleted money from the school district budget with the hope that the voters at the school district meeting would add to it, and the Supreme Court said, you can't do that. If you know there's a legitimate need, the goal and the purpose and the whole function of the Budget Committee is to provide the operating budget, to put the money into the operating budget for that need, and you cannot, by subterfuge, that was the word used by the Supreme Court, try to change both the role of the Budget Committee and the role of the selectmen, or in that case, the school district. So it's very clear under the statute, and it's very clear under the case law that to the extent that there's an operating budget item, that money should be in the operating budget. It should not be in a capital budget. It should not be in a capital reserve fund. And my understanding of the road maintenance is it's maintenance, it's repairs. That's an operating item, that's not a capital item. And so by transferring the money, I don't think there's any dispute about the need for the money. I think even the Budget Committee realizes there's a need for the money. By moving the money from the operating budget that would be voted on by town meeting and then implemented by the Board of Selectmen, by moving the money from the operating budget to a petition warrant article, you're essentially restricting, limiting, eliminating the flexibility of the Board of Selectmen, which under the three cases I just cited would not be appropriate. And I guess the question, Madam Chairman, which I'll direct to you, would be, what is the intent of this switch? You know, what is the Budget Committee trying to achieve by doing this? Because to the extent that there's any challenge of this particular action, that would be something that a reviewing court would ask that question.
And I will allow anybody here to jump in as well for the, I was asked the question, so I would like to answer it. Thank you. The discussion that was held during the budget meeting, and my understanding was that the amount of that budget line was felt that it was high enough that it should be in its own warrant article versus inside the operating budget. And I don't know if anybody here is disagreeing with that statement. Bill?
I was just going to say that my understanding of our discussion was it was more of a philosophical difference in terms of who gets to decide where the money is. Should it be a decision made by the select board, or should it be made by the legislative body? Again, I don't think there was a question, the money's needed, it's how is it to be used? And that was in effect the crux of the reason it was done, and that's my understanding of it. I don't know if anybody else has a different view on it.
Are you speaking as a planning?
Well, sure, yes.
Okay.
Kim St. Hilaire. My position as a Budget Committee member was that having it in the warrant article is the only way to control that those dollars go towards our roads. Once it goes into the operating budget, you heard from Attorney Roberts, the select board has the ability to do anything they want with that money within that operating budget. And that was one of my concerns. And so it just makes it too easy to dip into those funds to be used for other purposes. That was the one reason. And we have no guarantee, we have a guarantee this year from Select Chair Heward that that money will go towards our roads. She's not saying, she already stated she's not in for the long haul. So we have no guarantee that any other select board is going to continue to ensure that those dollars go towards our roads. So that was another concern of mine. And so those were the two reasons. I 100% agree that we need the money for the roads, and for the last 8 years, it's been the majority of those dollars have been in warrant articles. From 2010, I went back to 2010, it was $60,000 in the warrant, 15 in the operating budget. And it continued that trend until about 2014, when we started putting a lot more into the operating budget and less into more into the, actually, I'm sorry, we put more into the operating budget, but we also put more into the warrant articles. This year, we're proposing all operating budget and no warrant articles for $325,000. I agree, the money should be there for the roads. I just don't agree that it should be free for the taking within our operating budget.
That way.
Go ahead, Ron. Are you speaking, because that went a little bit past a budget committee statement, I think, because remember, we're representing a committee, not an individual.
And I'm speaking as an individual.
So you need to please go to the mic then as you work.
Yeah, it's on. I concur with Attorney Roberts regarding the fact that the Supreme Court has said within the operating budget, the selectmen may move the money around between line items however they wish. The concern as a private citizen, and I was the one that instigated this warrant article, was we want this money spent on roads exclusively. That was the intent, that was the purpose. I'm not suggesting they would do some shenanigans with this money if it were in the operating budget, but by putting it into a warrant article, I guarantee you by state law, they have to spend it on roads. It can't be used for any other purpose. Now, I talked to DRA yesterday, and they basically said, what's the big deal? You're going to repair your roads, you're just guaranteeing that that $250,000 will be used on roads. What's the big deal? It has a no fault, no harm action, that's why.
Done. Are you taking public comment? Is that what this is about now?
Well, the public comment should be about the operating budget, but part of the operating budget is the removal of this line item. So if you wanted to have a comment, that would be fine.
Tom Coons, 413 Stockdale. So, if I'm understanding this correctly, if this warrant isn't passed, what happens?
There is not $250,000 for roads.
Okay, so, in essence, if the $250,000 is in the operating budget, instead of this, and the budget passes, the money's available, there isn't any concern that we're going to be just waiting for March to figure out whether or not we have this money. If it's voted in the budget, it'll be there.
Correct.
Okay.
It is not in the budget at this time.
Right. I really don't understand how this is even necessary. If this is what your concern is, then I'm not clear why we have any operating budget. Why don't we have everything that is dealt with by the select board, which we all elect. We elect the select board to do this job, to make sure that things are being paid for as they come along. I'm getting the impression, and maybe I'm overstepping this, but I'm getting the impression that the folks that put this together do not trust the select board. And if that's the case, you know, there's no other reason you would do this. I didn't hear anything until this that indicated we were having a problem with our select board appropriating funds correctly. This is the first I've heard of this. So this really is, it's concerning. It makes me wonder, well, is there something else going on here that I'm not aware of? Is there something else with the budget? You know, was there some fuzzy math or something that just didn't add up right? This makes no sense to me. If this warrant, as you're suggesting, if it fails, then that's $250,000 that we may need. We're gonna have to figure out somewhere else to get it from. Is that not correct? Is that not a correct statement?
That is a correct statement if there were to be, yes, that road
Okay.
work done. Yes.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Ed, did you want to speak as a committee member or as an individual?
I can do it as an individual, and you know, even though I'm a member of the committee.
You gotta go up to the mic, Ed, please. Thank you.
My question to Steve Roberts, and I'm not sure he answered my question. I'm concerned, you know, I'm an old timer. When there's change, I want to fully understand why change is occurring. And as has been indicated, there tends to be a gravitation of items to the operating budget, which formerly were in the capital items. That's okay, but first of all, I want to know what, by law, can we put in capital items and what are we required to put in operating items? What is the definition of a capital item for budgeting purposes and what is the definition for operating purposes? And in the old days, we used to go by the number of years involved and so forth. Now that doesn't seem to be the thing. So I don't know what the state legislature or the Supreme Court of New Hampshire has indicated what is the definition of a capital item and what is the definition of an operating item, so I can understand and differentiate. It's nothing to do with the trust of the selectmen. This is a philosophical issue that, at least for me, and I think for several others in the budget committee, is to understand when change occurs, what's the justification for it. And if I understand Steve's interpretation, if the selectman said it'd be one way, it would be another way. If I were a selectman again and I said, well, many, all the capital items for road repair for more than 2 years or 1 year or whatever would be capital, it would revert back. So does it depend upon the decisions of the existing board of selectmen? And if we don't like the way it's being done now, then your solution to that is change the capital position of the board of selectmen that would lean towards capital versus. And it's all boils down to why capital. When you put it in the all other things in the operating budget, the selectmen, if you go out and negotiate with the road, and they tell you you got authorization for $250,000, but it's going to cost $275,000. You either pay the $275,000 or you just don't repair part of the road. So, but now with an operating budget, if they can find it elsewhere, you can go ahead and pay the $275,000 for repairing roads this year because you just transfer it from somewhere else in the budget. So it does have something to do. It gives selectmen flexibility to do that. But if I voted individual that was spend $275,000 on roads, I'd like to see that it would be limited to that and just wait till next year to do it for the budget. Some people say, well, trust the selectmen. Well, I was a selectman for a few years, and that varies a lot by individuals that have to be in the position. So I want to know what the law says and what options the selectmen have. So it's capital versus operating. I think somebody needs to be giving me a clear definition of that, irrespective of who's selectmen, but what.
Attorney Roberts, do you want to address Mr. Jensen's question?
Very briefly, I do not know under New Hampshire law, one, if there's even a definition between capital and operating for municipal budget purposes. There may well be. Certainly under federal law, repairs and maintenance are not capital expenditures, they're operating expenditures for tax purposes and depreciation, so I can answer that question. But I also want to clarify something related to what Mr. Kuhn said. If the appropriation, the special warrant article is defeated in its entirety, not amended, but just defeated, there cannot be any money from any other part of the operating budget transferred for that expenditure. So in a special warrant article, if the purpose, the road repair, if that warrant article is defeated or zeroed out, the selectmen do not have the flexibility to transfer money from anyplace else. And that purpose could not be achieved during the fiscal year.
Thank you. Some more here, Go ahead.
I'd like to try to answer Mr. Jansen's question. We found no state statutes that told us that we could not budget for road maintenance fully in the operating budget. And we're not taking some leap to the great unknown. We've been talking about doing this over the last 3 years. We've been steadily increasing the amount of the maintenance budget and been saying that we are moving towards putting all of road maintenance within the operating budget. So this is the year we did it. No, we heard nothing from either groups, town meetings, or people did not come to the select board meetings to say that they objected to that. We've looked around. Again, we're not on the bleeding edge. Certainly municipalities will put all of their money in road maintenance. But from a town perspective, the towns of New Durham, Farmington, Barrington, Lee provide for all of their road maintenance within the operating budget. So we don't feel that we're on the bleeding edge. We look around when we make changes like this to see what other towns do and how they manage them. As I've already said, the contract is probably going to be $300,000. So the road maintenance petition warrant doesn't cover that. So we're going to have to go back to the operating budget. And from a budgetary and accounting perspective, it streamlines the process to have that within your operating budget. So, we've got $325,000, $300 will be used for the contract, and more if the contract turns out to be more, and then the remainder will cover some other road maintenance projects throughout the town. That's the background. Thank you.
Celia?
Celia Leopold, 426 Washington Street. Suzanne just touched upon one of my questions. Why is there a difference in the amounts? The select board has asked for $300,000, or they put aside $300,000. According to the slideshow they gave, they're anticipating that much in road work. Why did the warrant article come in, or what was the decision to drop it down to $250 is my first question. Another question is, by putting this money back into the budget, doesn't that allow the select board more room for going above and beyond? Or if there is a decrease in the price, like if we lump all these roads together and we get a savings, doesn't that allow them to use the other money for other repairs and stuff that comes up? I mean, it's the top amount that they can spend, from my understanding. But if they go over, they can look for it in other budget lines. If they go under, that money can be used for other things, salt, sand in the wintertime. So those are my two questions at the moment. The difference in price and the flexibility to move things around.
So, we did tell the budget committee that the large road project that we have for the upcoming year was $300,000. I don't know why the road warrant went in for $250,000, but to answer your question, Celia, because the remainder of the money is in the operating budget, so when we do our, let's say, roughly $300,000 contract, we'll end up paying $250 of it from the road warrant and the rest from the operating budget. But as you can see, things are in more than one place. And so going forward for projections, for ease of understanding how we manage things, you've got things in a couple of different places. And again, we were not proposing anything. We were surprised because we were not proposing anything that seemed out of the ordinary. The towns of New Durham, Barrington, Lee, Farmington, and I'm sure many others, those are just the ones that we checked, have all of their road work within the operating budget. Are there still some towns that don't? Yes. I think Madbury was one. I don't know of others, but I believe Madbury is one. So, but the fact that there's only $250,000 in the road warrant, I mean, if it passes, then our contract would be funded by the road board as well as by the operating budget.
Andrea, Amanda, sorry.
Oh, well, thank you for trying. Angela.
Angela.
That's okay. I'm often called Andrea. Angela Matthews, 437 Locust Street. So this is a very confusing dynamic that it creates for me in terms of trying to vote this year, because I want to be sure that our road budget is funded, and I don't want to vote for something that feels counter to a process that as a voter last year I set in motion, which is trusting the select board to act on my behalf in my best interest. So my question is more for Attorney Roberts than for the Budget Committee, and that is, if as we address this difference of opinion and this challenge as a voter that I face, what does it mean for the long term of the town in managing our budget in this way through warrant articles? This is, I don't know that I can even can form a better question than that, because I'm very confused about process and about trust. And so what does it mean in the long term? This year, I will have to support something that helps the town. But in the long term, do I want to do this every year is my question, and how does this shape up for a long-term process for the town? If you could help with that, and where we might end up legally in the long term.
I think the best way to answer that is that if this line item appropriation were to be allowed to be put in front of voters was adopted, it could create a precedent that then other items would be pulled out of the operating budget and put into a special warrant article to the point where then the Board of Selectmen would be almost superfluous, because then town meeting would have decided every item down to somebody's salary, I suppose, if we really want to go out to that absurd. So the concern, I think, as expressed by the New Hampshire Supreme Court and as expressed by me, is that by starting down this path of taking away the discretion and flexibility of the Board of Selectmen, you're creating a precedent that potentially has no end. To where then the budget committee, or any 25 people, because that's how the petition warrant articles, any 25 people can do that. It's ultimately up to the town meeting, it's up to the legislative body to determine that, whether or not they want to go along in that process, but that's the concern I see.
Kim Sandler, 14 Tourism Way, speaking as president and budget committee member. So just for clarity, the money that has been appropriated for warrant article and operating budget for resurfacing the roads has always been kind of pulled together. And so this year, if the petition warrant article of $250,000 and what's in the operating budget are both approved, it combines $325,000 in road resurfacing money, all pulled together. So it's not like a loss of money at all. So that's my first point. My second point is the town, at town meeting, the residents who show up, should the petition article be defeated, which I think there's pretty much a 0% chance of that, the town has the ability to bring forward the operating budget for reconsideration, and everybody has can vote on adding that money back. So should the petition warrant article fail, this group of people, whoever attends the meeting, can make an amendment to the operating budget to put $250,000 back into the budget. So it's not like there's going to potentially be no money, because in the end, I believe this body will make sure the money gets there, either through the petition or through amendment of the operating budget.
Stella?
Bill Irving, Rollinsford, and Budget Committee. This money is, in my view, an operational item. It's not a new road, it's not a new building, it's maintenance, it's operation. It belongs in the operating budget. We elect a select board to manage the town. We cannot continue to handcuff them and tie them and say this, that, and the next thing. The remedy for shenanigans by the select board is to vote them out of office. We put them there, we want them to run the budget, we give them the money. If they don't, we throw them out of office. It's pretty simple, but we can't handcuff them. This money should be in the operating budget, and we should allow the town officials to do their job. Thank you.
I want to clarify what Ms. St. Hilaire said. The statute's very clear that when there is a special warrant article such as the $250,000, if the town meeting either deletes the purpose that's in that warrant article, or reduces the amount appropriated for that purpose to zero, or does not approve an appropriation contained in that separate article. So one of those three things, either of those three things, that purpose or article shall be deemed one for which no appropriation is made, and this is the key point, and no amount shall be transferred to or expended for such purpose. So if the warrant article were defeated in total, you could not amend the operating budget and then add in the money, because the purpose for the special warrant article would have been defeated, and the statute says no amount shall be transferred to or expended for that purpose. There's a way around this at town meeting where you would amend the warrant article to appropriate $1, because that's an appropriation. Then you could amend the operating budget and add back in the $250,000. So, but that's the machinations you would have to do, as opposed to just putting it into the operating budget as it was originally proposed. So I just wanted to clarify.
I think he's saying it can be added, but you have to leave the line, the warrant open at least $1.
Right, if you just don't pass it whatsoever, you can't then go spend that money for that particular purpose.
Thank you.
Celia? If, I've been only coming to town meeting here for a couple of years, but don't we usually do the operating budget first and the warrant articles later? And hasn't there been requests by the floor in the past to close certain articles so we cannot go back and visit them? What happens in that instance? Suzanne?
Just as a point of information, it is also possible at the end of the public hearing for the current budget committee to put that $250,000 back in the operating budget. So that is a possible, based on legal guidance, based upon reflection, that is something that this budget committee can do, is put the $250,000 back in there. We cannot touch the warrant article. The warrant article already exists. But at town meeting, we could provide some guidance, the board could, to recommend reducing that warrant article to $1.
So as a taxpayer, I'd like to see that money be insured, whether the budget committee decides to put it back in and then direct us at town meeting to reduce the article, or to go for both articles. It may not happen, but then you might have enough money in the budget to put aside for next year, to carry over for next year's budget. I want to know why, if you have a guarantee from the select board this year, it's so important to pull it out this year. I also have other questions about the overall budget, and I'm not sure that who can answer them. But I've seen signs for open positions at the town hall, so are all of the positions that are written out salary-wise, are they all currently filled, or are some of them open positions? Last year,
Again, I want you to stick to the operating budget or the warrant article discussion that we have, rather than going off onto, I believe you're referring to the posting of salaries.
well, I'm wondering if they're included in the budget.
So there, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to ask you, what is included in the budget?
The salaries for the open positions that the town currently has.
There are no, you're talking about the candidates running for office?
No, like
Unfilled positions.
unfilled positions, plow drivers, attendants at the transfer station.
Okay.
Are those
All right, good
salaries
question.
included in the operating budget?
Yeah. I'm sorry, I'm going to answer the question, am I not? So, yes, when we build our budget, when the board builds the budget that we propose to the budget committee, we don't take any mind of making positions. I mean, unless it's a position we completely eliminated. So we're building a budget to cover the salaries for all of the known positions in the town, whether they're currently filled or not. I'm unaware of any unfilled positions. I know we're trying to look for a fourth transfer station attendant, but otherwise I'm unaware of unfilled positions. But yes, the budget should be covering, that we propose, all of the needed operations of the town.
So the positions that are included, the new positions are in the budget, like the highway assistant and so forth.
The highway the full-time highway department assistant, we made that determination in the fall. So we hired that person already. And so yes, we're going to continue our full-time people. And so the budget for the highway department does in fact, and you'll see it, it has the road agent on a separate line, it has full-time salaries, and right now there's only one other than the road agent, and that's the full-time highway department assistant. Then it has part-time, which includes part-time help. It's actually all seasonal, I think. It's all sort of per diem. There is no regular. We did have a regular part-time highway department assistant, but that's the position that we've now made full-time. So the other part-time salaries go to plow drivers. We have someone who has been amazingly helpful to the town, who does equipment fabrication, welding, and other kinds of things for us. So that's all included in the budget for part-time positions in the highway department.
And in 2017, I believe, when the budget was passed, there was an increase in legal fees on the town side. We didn't see as much need for legal. Is that remaining true going forward? Or is it remaining steady?
Well, we're off to a running start, aren't we? I believe there's a decrease in professional services, which is both legal and engineering generally. And so I don't remember the issues 2 years ago. There were some. Last 2017, we built the budget knowing that we needed bond counsel for our loan applications. We had, we're renegotiating a Comcast franchise agreement. We were buying and selling some property. We were working on finalizing the boundaries between Dover and Oak Street, between Dover and Rollinsford along Oak Street. So there have been a number of issues. We've slowly been pecking away at them. There was an issue with land that we owned in Berwick that we resolved with Mr. Fogarty. So there have been a number of issues that we built the budget up so that we could start to peck away at these things. And so we did, and we've been successful. There's still some ongoing that we haven't completed, but because of that, I don't know what the figure is, but we did recommend a decrease overall in legal fees.
Thank you.
I just have a clarifying question going back to this confusing issue around the warrant article and the budget and the roads.
Just say your name.
Oh, sorry, yeah, Lucy Putnam, Sligo Road.
Thank you.
So as I remember, as some people have also stated, that in the past we have had warrant articles for the roads separate from the budget, and that has been deemed appropriate. So what I'm trying to understand, and just to make sure I have it right, I'm wondering whether people maybe have the same question, is that because this year it was put into the budget, that is what then would make it illegal to pull it out of the budget at this point, or that it could be challenged legally to pull it out of the budget at this point? Is that correct? Is that where the problem is lying here? Or do I have it totally wrong?
Counsel, would you like me to take a stab at this?
Feel free.
In essence, yes. So again, from a background point of view, the board has been talking about for a number of years, slowly increasing the, putting road maintenance in the operating budget with a decrease in the road warrant article, with the final result of having it all be in the operating budget. Again, we're not doing anything that's bleeding edge. Take a look at the budgets of Farmington, New Durham, Barrington, and Lee. And I'm sure a lot of others as well. But once the board, the select board, the governing body has determined that it feels that the road maintenance should be within the operating budget, to have a budget committee, which is my understanding of what happened. The budget committee decided it didn't care for that, like it, whatever, all the reasons that they've stated. Then they were able to pull it out and then, oh, by the way, insert, get a petition warrant article in there. So could a budget committee then in the future do the same thing for, I don't know, police salaries, for anything that's currently in the operating budget? I think that that's the precedent, or that's the issue, is that the budget, while the budget committee knew it couldn't do it as a budget committee, it still tried to engineer the same thing by reducing the budget and then going out and putting in a petition warrant article. And the same thing theoretically could happen with any item that the board chooses to put in the operating budget.
Great, thanks. That clarifies it for me. So as a citizen, it sounds to me like for this year, we need to leave this money should be in the budget, and so I would encourage the budget committee to put that money back in the budget. And it sounds like if there's concern going forward with this, then another year pressure should be put on the select board to take that out, if that's what people feel is appropriate. So I'm not going to get into the future, but just for right now, I would encourage the budget committee to please put this money back in the budget. I'm worried about battles or legal issues that could come up, as Attorney Roberts has explained to us, if we continue on this path.
Nancy?
Nancy Diane Rollins Road. Is it your interpretation that the budget committee put out the warrant, or it was private citizens that put out the warrant for the $250,000?
I'd be happy to answer that question. Read the minutes, look at the video. At the budget committee meeting, the budget committee members who wanted to do this said that they were going to put together a petition warrant article to, as yes, it's citizens, but they were members of the budget committee saying that that's what they were going to do. At the end of the meeting, right after the adjournment, Mr. Crozier had the petition warrant article and went around getting signatures from those budget committee members who voted to do this.
Correct, so that we actually did it as private citizens, we didn't do it as a budget committee. So the warrant article is not represented by the budget committee.
Do we have any other public comment? Charlie?
Thank you. Charles Putnam, 85 Sligo Road. I'm speaking as the town moderator, and I will moderate as best as I can a fair, open, impartial town meeting from the presiding point. I do think it's important to correct a misstatement about the ability to amend the operating budget if this particular warrant article were to be voted down. In every one of the town meetings that I've been to in the last several years, there's a concerted effort by a group of people. It takes 5 people to get a secret ballot on any warrant article. And in pretty much every single monetary budget or monetary warrant article, there's been a secret ballot up or down on the full amount of the amount that was requested in the petitioned article. So if Attorney Roberts is right, that you vote down a capital budget item, that indicates the will of the body not to appropriate any money for that budget item, not for that purpose. So I would not be able to entertain a motion to reopen the operating budget at that time, as I understand Attorney Roberts' guidance.
Kim?
about precedents, and us changing kind of precedents of how money is appropriated via operating budget versus warrant articles. So the precedent has been that road resurfacing money has been primarily warrant articles for at least the last 8 years. And maybe Mr. Jansen can tell us how long that's been the precedent. And just a follow-up about bringing forward the operating budget for reconsideration. So, as I understand it, wouldn't it only be if somebody made a motion to not bring it forward for reconsideration, that it could not be amended? Question for Attorney Fox.
I think that's more moderated question.
Charlie, do you want to deal with that one?
Question is on whether you can amend the operating budget while you're in debate on that warrant article? Yeah, the operating budget can be amended during the debate, but Ms. St. Valaire's scenario was if this separate warrant article were voted down, there could be a motion to reopen debate on the warrant article, on the budget warrant article. And my understanding is that again, given the history that the same people proposing this petition are the ones that regularly ask for secret ballots, it's going to be an up or down on the full $250,000. If that warrant article fails, that will be the evidence that Mr. Roberts pointed to, that the intention of the legislative body is to not make any appropriations for that amount. And I would, I think, be compelled to interpret myself as not able to accept a motion to reopen debate for that purpose on that amendment. An amendment to put $250,000 back into the operating budget. The other thing is, motions to restrict reconsideration are fairly rare in our town, but they are permitted by statute. I believe last year, a little bit at my encouragement, there were several of those motions made. They're fairly recent in our town history, but again, motions to restrict reconsideration of a warrant article are legal. It requires, I believe, a 2/3 vote. It's a supermajority, a 2/3 vote to reopen. So the scenario that, oh, it's very easy to just go back in and amend the operating budget is, I don't think it warrants.
Just a quick follow-up, Mr. Moderator. I would like to request a legal opinion prior to town meeting.
I would not be able to give that legal opinion. It would be Attorney Roberts.
On the process for this at town meeting.
If the operating budget, which comes first in the warrant articles before the special warrant article, if that were amended to increase the 250, that would be appropriate. And then if, when we got to warrant article 12, for the $250,000, if that were amended to $1, then we'd still be able to use the increase in the operating budget for that purpose, for road resurfacing. However, if the operating budget was passed at $1,959,000, whatever that number may be, I see two problems. If then the special warrant article were defeated, as Mr. Putnam said, that's evidence that the legislative body has determined that that purpose should not be implemented by the town for that year, and you wouldn't be able to go back to the operating budget to increase it by the $250,000 for the reason that the body has now expressed its intent. And it's also above the 10% limit. So you can't go above the 10% limit, which would be $195,000. So we have two problems there. So my opinion, which I'll give to you now, would be that you wouldn't be able to pass the operating budget at the $1,959,000 level, defeat the $250,000 special warrant article, and then reopen the operating budget to add the $250,000.
So I think what you're saying is if that were a thought, then the operating budget itself would have to be amended first to include the $250,000, and then the warrant article at a later time would be dropped to the $1.
To $1. That would achieve the purpose that could otherwise be achieved if the budget committee were to adopt the operating budget, including the $250,000, We're still, the warrant article's still there, that'll still be presented at town meeting, but there'd have to be an explanation, presumably from the select board and the budget committee as to what their concern is.
Thank you.
Yes. That raises another concern that I'm
Mike,
just
could you
going
move,
to put out.
use the microphone, please? It's right.
Is this on?
Yeah.
Hearing more specification, I'm a little concerned that we can't even at town meeting increase the operating budget by $250,000 because it is higher than 10%. So that's another concern. I think it's something that we have to address here. We've had a lot of good conversation. It may be time to move on, but I think it's something we have to address here as a budget committee now before we go to town meeting. But just bring that up.
The 10% includes all capital reserve fund, all special warrant articles. So the 10% isn't just the 1,959,000. You have to add up all those numbers to the extent that I didn't make that clear.
Okay. Lorraine?
Lorraine Hanson, Watson Lane. Given the discussion today, I really urge the budget committee to take a reconsideration and vote that $250,000 back in. It avoids a lot of legal problems. It's just simpler and it makes the most sense. I urge you to trust our select board. They worked for months on these budgets. I think that it's only fair that we respect them. And I respect the work that the budget committee has been doing, but I think you all need to understand this is opening a can of worms we do not need. Thank you.
Any other comment?
Yeah, Tom Coons. I've been hearing some of the discussions since I last spoke. Honestly, I have absolutely no idea why we would ever want this kind of confusion. This the only thing I'm hearing is, and it's just my opinion, the only thing I'm hearing is we do not trust our select board to use these funds appropriately. There's no other reason why we would have this. To Mr. Irving's point earlier, if we have no trust, then we need to just vote them out of office. It's really that simple. This is just the most confusing, ridiculous thing I've ever heard. We're talking about, things being closed during town meeting. We have to, just the process itself is so absolutely absurd. And the fact that we have to have a lawyer here to explain this is just ridiculous. We're talking about any challenge to this is going to cost the town money. Now, who's going to appropriate that? Are we going to, and why don't we have a warrant article that we'll have to put up for the town to vote as to whether or not the select board can actually appropriate the funds to defend against something like this. This is what this is about. You're absolutely, to Mr. Irving's point again, you're handcuffing the select board. I see no evidence at all, any meeting I've ever gone to, that this is necessary. This is absolutely ridiculous. It's a waste of time. It's confusing to voters. The $250,000, or whatever the amount is, if I'm hearing this correctly, this is not for a road project. This is for road maintenance. Why would that not be in the operating budget? I mean, if you're telling me we're going over to Smith Street and we're going to dig up the whole thing, we've got quotes and all that, okay, that's fine. This is for road maintenance. So are we going to make it so that if this doesn't pass, which, I'm hearing things like, well, there's virtually no chance it won't pass. Well, we've seen votes before that were pretty close. And when things don't pass, there isn't money available for certain, whatever maintenance or things that need to be done around town, that presents a problem. So I just don't get this. We've spent this whole morning talking about this issue. Obviously, There's so much confusion about why, and just from what I'm hearing, why this is even necessary. You know, if we can't trust, again, if we can't trust our select board to appropriate funds the right way, then they just need to be voted out of office. It's really that simple. I'm not seeing any warrant article for that, and that sounds like what the problem is. So thank you.
Do we have any other public comment as far as the operating budget? Yes, sir.
Joe Dash, 22 River Road. Pretty interesting conversation, and I think we all have that goal that everybody agrees to. But this procedural issue, how does that get resolved? I can see it being a big problem going forward in running the town. But is there a vote that takes place in this meeting? I'm kind of new to New Hampshire politics here, but how do we get to the point that things that are not capital items are part of the operating budget, and what was proposed by the budget committee in terms of taking something out and putting it as a warrant article is something that should not be done, not only for this one, but maybe for something else down the road.
And this is a public hearing for public comment. There is no vote at this hearing. There is, I don't know if you want to, Suzanne explain. I'll have Suzanne explain, give you a little tutorial.
So, while there is no vote that the public can do with this, you're providing testimony, asking questions, and the like. What happens after this is that the budget committee still has another shot at making some changes to the operating budget. And so, which is why you've heard some people come up and encourage the budget committee to put the $250,000 back into the operating budget. So that's one. There still remains, there does remain, and it will be somewhat confusing town meeting, but perhaps not as much if in fact this $250,000 is back, and that is the warrant article that exists. None of us can touch it. It's a legally presented petition warrant article, so we will have to act upon it at town meeting. So one scenario that might happen is normally a board member gets up after each petition article, the moderator recognizes one of us, and so what I suspect would happen if the $250,000 is put back into the operating budget today is that the board member would provide as much of this in as clear a way as possible and suggest to the body that we reduce that amendment to $1.
I would go along with a couple other people that in order to simplify the process, I would suggest to the budget committee that it would be a cleaner process for the town to let the select board run these kind of operating things and to have the warrant article be for capital improvements, which I agree or not, something that makes sense.
Thank you. Kim?
So first I'd like to commend Chief Ducharme about his process, and we've been talking about it as a budget committee for quite a while, about introducing merit-based increases instead of across-the-board increases. I still have concerns about the across-the-board increases that happen every year for the rest of the staff, without evaluation of performance, without job descriptions, and that's been my beef for the last few years as a budget committee member. And then my other point is the operating budget is increased. So it appears that the bottom line budget is reduced by $1 million, but that $1 million is really warrant articles. The overall operating budget, minus the $250,000 road dollars, is still an increase of $125,000. So I am concerned about these large increases year over year, and we're looking at almost $350,000 more in the operating budget this year than we were 5 years ago.
Any other comments about the operating budget? Hearing, one more. And I'd like to, just for the sake of time, kind of limit any repeating, but go ahead, sir.
Yes, my name is Paul Casal from Heritage Drive, and I'm looking at the 10 years, spending plan. You might think I'm crazy, but I'm looking at 2022, 2023, and 2024. The town budget is going to be going up by 5.5%, 6.4%, 4.57%. And on top of that, the long-term financing, which is only including the culvert, fire engine, and transfer station 2017 warrant articles, doesn't include any future projects. So looking at the future budget, I see a problem coming up that if you include all the future warrant articles, that the town budget could go up by over 10%.
Good question. So, and I'm glad someone's looking at the 10-year projections. Thank you. We spent a lot of time on that. So, the goal for the budget committee, the goal for the board this year was to present a budget that was within a 2% overall increase. And by overall, I mean the sum and resolution of the operating budget, the capital expenditure and reserve budget warrant articles, as well as our anticipated revenue. Because you can't, when you're talking about tax rates and the increase that you might see in your bill, you can't look at just one term. You have to look at all of the terms. And so we managed this year to have an estimated tax decrease. I would just say we're holding the line because it's small enough, right? So now, and you'll see that for the next 2 or 3 years, we're sort of about 2.1%, I think, which gives me, as a budget person, the ability to say, okay, that's great. I look at that and I say, we can probably get that down to below 2, because there's time. So that those projections are just, first of all, an inflationary figure just added right across the top of the operating budget, 2%. An inflationary figure of 1% on the revenue. And then our debt repayment schedule. And so what, for me, and I'm going to speak just for myself as a board member, not the whole board, I was happy for the next 2 to 3 years, because I'm looking at that and I'm saying, okay, great. We can bring that to within 2, and maybe even less, but certainly within 2. And you're right, outwards it starts to look a little, but that represents things on the capital improvement project plan. That's largely the driver for that. And so there's plenty of time for the capital improvement project plan committee to get together, look at that, maybe stretch some things out. We've already heard from our road agent that the next truck that needs to be replaced does not have to be as expensive as the one we currently have. So there are opportunities as we work on that to say, look, looking forward, what can we move out? What can we reduce? What can this and that? So I'm not so worried about that. It is interesting. And it's helpful to know. It means we are going to have to do some work. Next year we'll take a look at that again and see if we can stretch out the 2% to the next 2 or 3 years. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yes, but thinking to myself, because I voted for last year's warrant articles, and I'm saying to myself this year, geez, did we really have to spend all that money for the transfer station? Did we always, did we have to spend all that money for the fire engine? Couldn't we have bought a standard truck instead of, special one? So I'm thinking about the future, and we all make mistakes, and I'm thinking to myself, geez, did I vote correctly on those items? To learn about, the next items. Because we all, you can always look back and says, oh, I should have done it that way or this way. What matters is what you do now and in the future.
Right, which is why we think it's a good idea to have the projections, so we can look at that and have conversations like this. I would encourage you, we're always looking for people to serve on the capital improvement project plan. We will contact you, and if you'd like to serve on that and help us out with that, that would be a great thing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Charlie?
Charlie down 44 Rollinsford. You just talked about 2% across the board. What's the librarian getting for a raise? 12%? That's not 2%.
We're not gonna have a banter back and forth. I think the answer is in the budget. I think it's clear in the budget what the librarian's increase is.
I believe the budget committee was supposed to get a follow-up on why they went to 12%.
As a budget committee, we can discuss that after this meeting. Thank you. Yeah. Dennis is making his way up.
I'm stiff, I'm getting old. It's all right. I got a question. I see Oak Street's getting pretty well beat up now. I'm talking about paving. Do you have any plans to go over to repair that? Is that a right question? This is all part of the paving.
No,
Not-
it's not the current budget. Come see the board.
No, I'm just saying that's paving, you know. All right, thank you.
Any other public comment? Okay, with that said, I'd like to turn it over. Are you going to present this?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. So Suzanne will talk about the warrants. I apologize for that.
All right, these are just the warrants that have appropriations associated with them. So if you've gotten a piece of paper, a document from out back, you'll see that there are some gaps in the numbering, and that's because those warrants in between don't have appropriated amounts, and so they're not relevant for this particular meeting. All right, so the first item is a service truck for the highway department. We brought this up last year, and there was a lot of discussion at town meeting, and we never executed the plan. Our road agent, we had asked our road agent to wait close to the end of the year, and because we were concerned about some of our larger capital projects. And by that time, he was no longer with us. We hired a new road agent. And so in talking with our new road agent, he did recommend that we go forward with a service truck, that it is economically, makes more sense for some of the smaller jobs around town to not use that Ford F-50 that we have. He would like to outfit it, however, with a utility box, with plow. In the past, we usually had at least one occasion, sometimes two, where one of our trucks is out of commission for a snowstorm, and we have to contract with Mick or someone else to do the road plowing to the tune of like a couple of $3,000. And so that is the rationale. Our road agent is here too if Bobby would like to ask a question and if Michelle thinks it's appropriate for him to answer. It is recommended by the board, and it is coming out of the capital improvement project plan, so it has no impact on taxation, the 28 taxation. It will be funded by the CIP. Also for the highway department is a proposal to buy a roadside mowing attachment from the CIP, so again, no impact on the 2018 tax rate. We currently contract out this service. We've had it budgeted at $3,000. Last year, we were unable to find somebody to do it for that amount, and we were up to $4,000, maybe a little bit more than that to contract it out. It never have been because that person's equipment broke, and so we ended up not doing any roadside mowing. With this attachment, we will be able to save whatever it would pay us for an outside contractor fee. It's recommended by the board. And one of the things that the Budget Committee will do after this public hearing is also review these. And just as the board has either recommended or not recommended, the Budget Committee will either recommend or not recommend all of these warrants. This third capital purchase item is for a police cruiser for the Rollinsford Police Department. This is a biennial request, comes up every other year. And the money, just as with the truck, is for both the purchase and the outfitting. So the police will have to do detail work, they transfer radios, they do whatever else police people need to do to get the cruiser ready to be on the road. All right, those are the purchases, and they're all funded from the capital improvement reserve fund. And now we're going to replenish some of our reserve funds. So this is what the next set of warrants is about. First is that very same capital improvement reserve fund. We're asking for $178,200. You say, well, that's an odd amount. I'm a slave to the numbers. that's what came out when you looked at the capital improvement plan for 2018. So it's $178,200. The plan is available on the website. It's hard to print. It's big, but I encourage you to take a look at it. In 2017, so the end of the year that just ended, the fund balance for that fund was $255,000. We're going to increase that by $80,000 as a net, because we're asking for $99,000 to fund those purchases I just talked about. We're putting in $178,200, so it'll be a net increase to that in the CIP budget, close to $80,000. We have a culvert repair replacement fund. This has been to help us with some of these large culvert projects. The smaller culvert projects come out of maintenance, our road maintenance budget. These big ones, we have to sort of plan for and save for, in last year's case, borrow money for. So we did not ask for a request to this fund in 2017. There was a balance in there. We used that we completely wiped out that balance in order to help with the culvert repair project. So that project was funded largely by borrowed funds from the USDA, but also to, I think, up to $50,000 by the money that remained in this fund. What are we going to do now with the culvert repair replacement fund? Our goal are the two culverts that are on Sligo Road that we're not sure exactly what we're going to do, but we know they're both problematic. The Conservation Land Trust Capital Reserve Fund. So we're asking to put $10,000 into that reserve fund. However, there's no impact on the tax rate for this one because the money will be transferred from the land use change tax fund. The article is a little complicated. It says there isn't any money in there. It's going to come from fund balance, blah, blah, blah. But I'm here to tell you there is money in the LUCT fund. And so that $10,000, if this is approved, will come from the LUCT fund into the Conservation Land Trust Fund. At the end of 2017, the balance in that fund was $135,538. Land surveys, this is also something we see every year. It's a request to spend money if the situation arises. So we're requesting to spend $5,000 from one of our reserve funds, from the Conservation Land Trust Capital Reserve Fund, in order to fund land surveys and other associated expenses regarding conservation land stuff. So if there's a landowner who's thinking about maybe providing a conservation easement or something like that and want some help from the town for a survey or something like that, this gives us the authority to spend up to $5,000 for that. If we don't spend it, it stays in the reserve fund and it's not used for anything else. This is the road resurfacing petition warrant article. We've already said a few things about it, so this is what it is, and it's not recommended by the select board. This is another petition warrant article. We have to look at it today because it also has a very small, but nonetheless, it has an appropriation associated with it. So we have a newly formed historic committee, which is really wonderful to have, and they are requesting to establish a fund within the town's trust funds. We have trustees of the trust funds that manage and oversee all of our reserve funds. And they're requesting to establish an expendable trust fund, but they're asking for a little bit more than that. So they want to set up the fund, and then they want to transfer $350, appropriate $350 from fund balance to seed that new expendable fund. And the $350 represents more or less the amount of revenue that they brought in 2017 from donations, from sale of some items, and the like. And so they're asking to transfer that into this expendable trust fund. They're also asking that the select board be agents of the fund. So if in 2018 they want to spend $125 on something that seems historical and appropriate to their charge, they will come to the board and say, can we have $125 from our expendable trust fund to do whatever it is? And the board would be able to say yes or no. We could say yes. And then that's it for the warrants, but we just want you to keep in mind that there is no proposal for a new police station in this year's budget. None of us have forgotten it. We appointed a special committee during 2017 to look at sites, to look at a new police station, and what that means to us. And we're not bringing forward any proposal, but the committee did ask us if we would submit a request for proposal, an RFP, just to get an idea of cost. We did do that in November, I believe. And the cost came back about 1.1 to 1.3 million, in that range, using the Silver Street site. So it was a total package as far as site development, landscaping, everything. But that was the figure. Now, because, you know, the board is not going to make that decision. That is definitely a town level decision to make about the police station. We don't have it in our projections because we don't know what the town feels about this. We don't know where it might go, but there is money for a police station in the CIP. It's not sufficient to fund a brand new one of 1.1 million, but if you're thinking about, oh my God, you know, we need to come up with that 1.1 million, it won't be quite that bad because we are every year putting money in the CIP towards a police station. And that's it.
We would take public comment at this time on the warrant articles. Celia?
I have a bunch of questions, so I guess I'll start with warrant article 6. We appropriated money in 2017 for the highway department to get a service truck. What happened to those funds? Are they still available? Is this money that we're requesting on top of that, or is that part of the same fund?
So the money to fund, I think it was a $20,000 request. That money was in the capital improvement plan reserve fund. It's called the SIP reserve fund. And we didn't spend it, so it stays in the CIP. So that was part of whatever the balance was that I mentioned earlier in the SIP fund. That 20,000 is part of that balance. So this is like erase it. Didn't happen, just erase it out of your mind. This is a brand new request. It starts from scratch. It's not going to be added to with another 20,000. This request stands on its own.
And this may be a question for the road agent instead of this, but will there be a need for additional space or renovations at the highway department, or is there space for it?
I believe I can answer that because we asked that very question about road agent last year. Yes, there is space within the highway shed.
Okay. I'll move on to my next question. There is buying a mower, will we see the savings in the short term, long term? And is there a vehicle for it to go on? And what is the liability to the town if it doesn't pass?
All right, so the $12,000 estimate is a mowing attachment that goes on either the Bobcat or the Volvo. So yes, it will fit on our equipment. We have, while we had budgeted $3,000, we couldn't find anybody to do it for $3,000 last year. So the cost is closer to four, maybe a little bit more. So in 3 years, we will have saved the mowing attachment. As far as liability, there's no difference, you know, there's no difference. If you're talking about if we destroy someone's property, it's our, whatever the problem is, I don't know that it is a problem because I'm not a lawyer, it would be the same whether we had a contractor or did it ourselves.
For the police cruiser, do we know if it's going to be another SUV or a
Yes.
sedan? For the culvert repair warrant article, what is the amount we're looking for the Sligo Road? I may have missed that.
Well, we don't know. So is it going to be more than 10? Yes. So one of the things we have to do is come up with some engineering solutions and get some input from the town residents, because in particular, the one that's now a one-lane road, it's a beautiful stone culvert that goes back to probably the Civil War era. And so while it's easy to say, the span is long enough for us to put this on the bridge program, the state's bridge program, the state could pay 80% of replacing it, the town would pay 20%, and that would be fine. But we have to bring it to the town and see if what the town feels about replacing the stone culvert. So we're not sure. And we're also not sure what the solution is for the other culvert. It's two culverts that sit one on top of another. It's kind of a weird thing, and so I'm not sure what the best solution is.
Is the select board looking to put any money aside for an emergency repair like we had a few years ago, where we had to slip line of one here in town?
Well, what we are trying to do now is plan. And so, could an emergency always happen anywhere at any time? Yeah, because we don't control Mother Nature or people or anything like that. But we're not anticipating anything in the next 3 to 5 years.
And for Articles 11 and 12, the reserve funds and the land survey, is there an optimal amount that the select board would like to see in those accounts?
So what do you...
The Conservation Land Trust Capital Reserve Fund and the land survey and related expenses.
All right, so the first one is a request to put money in a reserve fund. We've customarily asked for $10,000. I'll just leave it at that. The other one is not a reserve fund. The land survey is a potential expense that would be funded by the reserve fund that we just talked about. If, just like the truck we didn't buy, if no one comes to us, if there's no action that the board might take that we would legitimately pay for with this warrant, if nothing like that happens, we don't spend the $5,000, it stays, or $3,000 or whatever, it stays entirely within Conservation Land Trust Capital Reserve.
And then my last comment is that the Historical Committee has talked about fundraising, and by establishing a fund, this would allow us to raise those funds instead of coming to the town to request funds to do historical preservation and work around different historical resources in town.
Any other public comment on the warrant articles? Okay, hearing none. Dennis, or?
Are you ready for me?
Yes. I believe we are. Will you address the water and sewer budget?
I think you formally closed the hearing.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm formally closing the hearing on the town. Thank you. I did.
Okay, thank you. I notice everybody's running out the door. Do we have any water and sewer people here that are on water? Who's on water? Who's on water and sewer? Okay, this is the budget. I'm going to present the first page. Does everybody have a copy of this? What do you want a copy? Do you care? Okay. The admin for the water and sewer district, it's $60,854. We got a slight increase in wages and clerical. Gail, can you hear me all right? Gail and Jamie are part of the water and part of clerical and treasurer. Slight increase. Any other questions on this? Being none, I'll move to revenue. Sewer, wastewater. I propose it's $295,000 for sewer. Budgeted this year, we got $299,024 so far. That's because of the chamber of projects. $450,000 homes back at the church. You know where they are on Wentworth Street.
So these are all entrance fees, plus revenue in the district. That's in water. In sewer, we received $281,316. What's, that's my, what's that 20,587? That's what we have, correct? So we haven't received.
Right.
Those are disconnects and things like that. Any questions? None at all, okay. Now we'll get to the interesting part of it. I have Ray, Frank, Mike, Gail. Say that. Any questions? I'm not going to answer any questions. These people will answer all the questions. All right, water. Rose $295,000 this year for that. I want Ray to kind of get up and explain the water to us and what are the projects ahead and what are we going to do about the arsenic, about the lead. What are we moving into, Ray? Can you do that for me? Oh, we don't want to do the, what the plan is to do, okay. That's fine. Okay, any questions on water? I could say that we're going to have some rate increases this year, next year. Can I say that? No, I mean. Don't know yet. We don't know yet. Okay. Any questions on sewer? 301,903. That's what. Budget. Any questions? That's too easy. That's too easy.
I only got 30 seconds of tape left.
That's a shame. All right. Thank you.
Okay, any other business that would come before this committee today? Hearing none, we'll close the public hearing. And we will be, yes, we have a public meeting that you're welcome to stay directly after a restroom break. But you are not to participate, to observe.